Welcome back to the Sebastian Scales Show. So, yeah, that the end of that trip, I mean, the whole trip, everything just culminated in such a intense point of, it felt kind of like a point of no return in terms of feeling connected with the universe, everything, everyone, and not a point that you would want to return from anyway, either. But it felt like things had changed for the better. And it felt like it just opened me up to, and my family up to anything. It's like, well, if that sequence can happen and we were all there for it, we all saw it and experienced it, it's kind of like, well, what is off the table at this point? All of a sudden, it's like anything seems possible. And it felt amazing. I left that trip and took the ferry back to Seattle and was flying home, and it just felt like I belonged. It felt like there was nothing that could go wrong or has gone wrong. And it was like, wow, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Just all of a sudden, every moment just became something. It's like there's something there. And so in episode 10, the one called Worthiness, where I met Quinn 92 with Galen. So Galen, she and I have been having, a number of pretty wild sequences that made us feel similarly to the experiences that I was having with my parents, where it's just like, wow, there's a lot going on here, and we are just along for the ride, and it feels good to be experiencing it together. So like all of that stuff that happened with Quinn 92 and this other sequence that sort of sparked these synchronicities with Galen happened when, this is before I went back to Seattle, she was house sitting her friend's place in Burbank, and they have a pool and a hot tub. And so I went up there to stay with her for a night, and I got there and it was just a perfect sunny day. The whole pool is surrounded with flowers, and she made like guacamole, and it was it just felt so good to be there. And at one point I went on the diving board to go into the pool, and I jumped up and did a pretty big jump and dove into the pool and just cracked my chin on the bottom of the pool. And I went back up to the surface and was kind of like, all right, cool, I'm not in that much pain. And then I kind of looked down and was like, all right, just like, there's some blood for sure, blood coming out of my chin. And I got out of the pool, and Galen came over, and she was like looking at my chin, and it was just super bloody.
Maybe let's see what it's like in a little bit, but then again, urgent care costs more when it's after hours. Whatever you feel, we can go there, or whatever you feel more comfortable with.
I don't know. And as she started dabbing it with some paper towels, and as soon as I sort of registered what this meant, I was like really, really pissed at myself. I was like, you just went and took this blissful day, and now we're going to have to go to urgent care or potentially the hospital. Like, it definitely looks like I need stitches. And I was like, you suck. You suck for this. And my brain just started attacking me for apparently ruining the day. And then I saw it. I caught it. And just decided to go with the theme of existence lately, and was just like, let's stay open here. Let's see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, but let's just see, and let's just go along for the ride, and just don't worry about it. And so we were trying to figure out what to do, and it was Memorial Day. So we were looking at different urgent cares, and there were only like a handful that were open. And so we decided to go to one of them. And we were driving through Burbank, and on the way to the urgent care, I started noticing there was this sequence of street signs. I have them written down here. Mansfield Avenue, Cornell, Magnolia, Linden, and Madison Avenue. So Madison Avenue, I grew up on. My parents currently live there. Linden Avenue is the street that I lived on in college, which was at Cornell. And Magnolia was the street that I lived in, or the place that I grew up in for the first 4 years of my life before moving to Bainbridge. And Mansfield Ave was the street that I lived in Hollywood before moving to Venice, where I am now. And I saw this sequence of street signs, and I was like, what the fuck is this? It's like I just saw a trajectory of my addresses all in a line in front of me, and immediately it was like, all right, you got my attention. You know, I don't know what this means, but something's going on here, and I'm open. I'm open to it. I don't know what's happening. Maybe this is just the universal response to staying open. Things just start happening, or maybe they've always been happening and you just aren't seeing them because you weren't open. But that just opened me up even more, and I was just like laughing and telling Galen about this, and we were both just like, holy shit, this is interesting. So we kept going, and Burbank is a very trippy place. It's got kind of like eerie vibes to it, but like peaceful eerie, you know? Eventually we got to the urgent care. We parked on the street and we got out of the car and we went up to it, and it was closed, even though it said that it was open on Google. And again, let's just stay open to this. You know, who knows? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but my chin is bleeding and we do need to do something for it. And we turned to leave the urgent care, and across the street there was a McDonald's, and I had just seen an ambulance pull into the parking lot, and somebody got out of the ambulance and went into the McDonald's. And I just happened to see this like as we're walking back to the car. And I turned to Galen and I was like, should we go check that out? Should we just go ask that dude, like, if he thinks that I need stitches or something? And she was like, yeah, I mean, I guess so. Let's do it. And so, you know, just again, it's just like right in front of our faces. All of the urgent cares are closed, and yet here's a human driving an ambulance, an EMT or someone, who just is right in our eye line, and he just pulled in, you know? And so it just seemed very clear to do that. And so we crossed the street and we went over there, and we went into the McDonald's, and he was waiting for his order. And so I went up to him and I was like, hey man, sorry, I don't know if this is like appropriate, but I tilted my head up and I was like, I just did this to my chin, and I was curious if you think that I need stitches. And so he checked it out, and then he was like, come out to the ambulance for a moment. I'll get you patched up. And I was like, yeah, dude, come on. How sick is this? Like, he was so nice. And his name was Eddie. So we went into the back of his ambulance in a McDonald's parking lot, and he cleaned up my cut. He was saying that he probably didn't think that it needed stitches, but depending on how it looks tomorrow, if it hasn't gotten any better, I should probably go get it checked out. But in the meantime, he gave us some bandages and he cleaned it and basically just said, it's all good. And I had like $20 in my wallet, and I asked him if I could like pay for his McDonald's or something. And he was like, no, dude, like it's all good. And then I tried to give him the cash, and he was like, dude, it's all right. No sweat. Don't worry about it. And I've had like some pretty bad experiences at urgent cares before, not to mention the cost of them. But, you know, this urgent care being closed across the street ended up resulting in us getting free medical care instantly with no wait by a professional who charged us nothing. And he was so nice about it. And it really sort of intensified the trusting of the flow. Like, all right, let's keep staying open. Let's see what happens next, you know? And it just, it doesn't stop. Like the flow never ends. We're always in it. It's just a question of how much resistance do we have to it. And it certainly felt like in these sequences, there was not much resistance. And it feels like the more you go with it, the easier it becomes to trust it. And, so shout out to Eddie for the hookup in the parking lot. Appreciate that, brother. So from there, we started driving back to the place. And on the way, we decided to stop and get some food. And we were at this Mediterranean place. And we ordered our food. And then I paid for it. And I got the receipt. And it was order number 333. And I don't know if you're into angel numbers or what, but at that point, I'd been seeing a lot of them. And it sort of feels in the same vein as seeing all of those street signs where it's like, hey, just sort of a confirmation that you're going the right direction or you're feeling good or the universe is, playfully responding to the vibration that you're putting out. Confirmation or, who knows exactly what the correct interpretation is. There probably isn't one. Maybe the correct interpretation is just whatever it means to you in the moment. I don't know, but whatever it is, it feels good. And it's something that I'd been seeing a lot of lately, and yet I hadn't ever talked to Galen about it. And so I asked her, I was like, are you into numbers? And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, angel numbers. And she was like, yeah, totally. And of course she is. And so I showed her the receipt and she was like, oh, cool, And I was like, yeah. And then we walked out of the restaurant and immediately I looked across the street and the building directly across from the restaurant was 333. It was a giant 333. You could see it. It was so in front of your face, our faces. You couldn't miss it. And then I was like, Galen, look. And then she looked at it and was like, what? The same number? And what that felt like was it was confirmation that Galen and I should be talking about numbers and discussing these types of things. It was totally in line with this openness, this acceptance of reality, however it presents itself. And here is the video. It was the only numbered building in sight. You couldn't see like a 332 or a 334 anywhere. It was the only one, and we were waiting in the parking lot because we were waiting for our food, and it was a small restaurant, and it was so clear. It felt so obvious, and it gives life this connected oomph. It's like this reminder, all these different signs and synchronicities, they make you feel and remember that there's so much more going on here and that you are so much more than your brain tells you oftentimes, whether it's yelling at you for scraping your chin or, feeling unworthy of love, whatever the thing is. But this whole sequence happened because I scraped my chin on the pool. And in that moment with Galen and the numbers, we were just standing in the parking lot, just like tripping out for a second because it was such clear evidence of something that we don't understand and yet are fully connected to. And connected to together and connected with each other. It was like what was happening with my parents, where it's just, you just start feeling like excited and blown away by the unfolding of reality. And it just felt so good. And to think about, like, how many possible interpretations there were, negative interpretations, infinite, of course. Like how my brain initially reacted to me scraping my chin. It's so possible that if I had held that mentality, that style of thinking for the rest of the day, I probably would have missed all of this stuff. Or maybe I would have seen it, but it wouldn't have meant anything because I wasn't feeling open. I was feeling like this shouldn't be what's happening. I should have done a perfect dive off of the diving board and not scraped my chin and then spent the rest of the day at the house. Or whatever scenario the mind attaches itself to. It's like the more I stay open to whatever it is that I'm experiencing, the more I begin to see firsthand and feel that I'm just being drawn to where I need to be. And sometimes you need to scrape your chin on the bottom of a pool in order to get yourself to this number sequence, in order to deepen the connection with Galen. Not that connection wouldn't have deepened without it, but how much more fun it is to go with it and to see how protected you are and supported and fun it is along the way. It would be so not fun to have these experiences if I was just thinking about how upset I was about scraping my chin the whole time and how, oh my God, it's going to leave a scar and blah. It did leave a scar. Let's see if you can see this. No, I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can really, but it's right here. And my hair doesn't, my chin hair doesn't really grow there anymore, which is also kind of a sick reminder, It's like, oh, wow, hey, don't forget that even the things you think are bad might be perfect. You just don't know it yet. Not even might be, they are perfect. It's just up to you to decide whether or not they are. So Galen and I drove back from the restaurant after we got our food, and we were just like, sometimes you just get you just get lost for words, but it doesn't, it sometimes feels like you don't even need words. It's just fun to be in the space without needing to understand it. Maybe in the same way that I don't understand how it is that I'm beating my heart, and yet I'm doing it, and I can enjoy all the amazing things that are a result of my heart beating without needing to know how it is that I'm doing it. And that space, it feels good to exist outside of thinking and to just be in this state of awe, of total blissful curiosity in the unfolding. It also felt like, Galen and I, all right, we're meant to be seeing this stuff together. And that, it just felt like universal nudges in the direction of us being together. And, some of the stories that happened later on really take that to a whole other level. But in the meantime, that was sort of the beginning, and it just gets more intense from there. So now, flashing forward, I took the ferry back to Seattle and was flying home, and she picked me up at the airport. We went back to my place, and it was like, I already had feelings for her. Definitely. This was also the longest that we'd gone without seeing each other, and experiencing all that stuff with my parents and a lot of the feelings that Galen and I had been experiencing, and just having it all compound and intensify, it really made us seeing each other again feel so much more intense. And we got back to my place, and we went into my room, and we started hugging. And I still don't really know exactly how to describe this sequence, but we just kept hugging, and we were hugging hard. And it felt like with each hug, it felt like we got like closer. It felt like we were trying to like break the skin barriers, our break our body barriers, and like get at each other and connect on the inside. Like it felt like with each hug we experienced a deeper level of connection with each other, both physically but also like energetically. The way that we came to describe it was like soul sex. Like we were fully clothed and fully not having sex, and yet it felt closer than and more intense than like any sex that I'd had before. And I remember like my heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. Like my heart was trying to break through my rib cage and get into her rib cage. And her heart was doing the same thing. It was like, I don't know. It's quite hard to describe, but it's happened a number of times since then. And it generally is when like we haven't seen each other for a while, and you know, I guess the saying distance makes the heart grow fonder. But it just it felt very in line with the sequences that we'd been having before, where it's like, okay, here is the most intense physical connection that I've ever had with somebody romantically, and we are not having sex. We're not even kissing. Like we're like hug fucking each other. Respectfully. It felt like with each hug we got like closer to like being seen by the other person. Like we got closer to like experiencing that other person's energy. I don't know, dude. It was very trippy to experience and hard to explain. But I think a lot of what this acceleration and intensification of synchronistic experiences, a lot of it is falling away from words and being able to have hugging sex without having any thoughts about it, like, or having anywhere to get to. Like I remember that was a big thing about that experience that made it feel really good for me, was I noticed that I wasn't trying to get anywhere. I wasn't trying to escalate this, like, oh, we better start making out so that we can start taking our clothes off and bang. It was just total like contentment with what it was that we were doing, and also having absolutely no idea what was happening, and yet being totally in it and along for the ride. I mean, it felt like we were like traveling, almost like we were dreaming, like a lucid dream. Sort of in the same way that seeing all those street signs felt like I was going down this memory lane trip, where each street sign I would see for a couple of seconds, I would have memories of that place, and then it would go to the next sign and I would have memories of that place. I didn't have like any specific visions of places that we were, but it felt like we were reconnecting. Like we'd known each other in some way, somewhere, or some when. And it was like we were really starting to feel what that feels like. And it was fun feeling like, oh, we don't even need to have sex. We did, naturally, regularly, afterwards. But I remember after we finished, like, just laying there, and we were talking about how it was like it would have been fine if we never had sex again. It was just such another level of physical and spiritual connection that sort of blew our old perceptions of intimacy out of the water. It was like our spirits were coming. Hard to describe, but man, it was epic. We've also talked in the past about how for both of us, sex has often felt like a performative thing. Sometimes it's hard to really enjoy it because you feel like you need to be, playing some sort of a role. You need to know what you're doing, or you need to be convincing the other person that it's really good or whatever it is that you're dealing with. And it felt like a breaking down of those barriers, this soul sex, because it was clear that neither of us knew what was going on, and that for a lot of people, this would be insane what was happening. But we were both just open and in it together. And letting go of that fear of judgment allowed us to experience what was happening without fear, which is way more chill. It was really amazing to be able to experience a totally new sensation and something on that level of positive feeling, and to also feel like no attachment to it. And it wasn't like we were trying to elongate it either. It was just, it happened naturally without us. We weren't like, all right, let's hug it out until we come. We literally were it just happened without words. It wasn't planned at all. And then it was over. And it was like, wow, I was going to take some time to understand what this was, and maybe we never will, but it was so epic. So she stayed the weekend, and we meditated over the course of that weekend, which is so sick. I've been meditating for, a lot of my life, but it has never been something that I've done with anyone else really, other than at meditation retreats and with my dad sometimes and my mom. But meditating with somebody that you're romantically involved with is unreal, dude. You're both just sitting there, deepening your awareness, experiencing now more together. And that's one of the things about her that has really turned my world upside down in terms of what it is that I was looking for. These experiences that we were having together made so many of the boxes that I had in my head in terms of what I'm looking for in a girlfriend seem totally insignificant. Yes, I want to be with somebody who I find attractive and interesting and smart and funny. And she's all of those things. But she started showing me boxes that I didn't even know that I needed to have checked. I didn't know these boxes existed until I started interacting with her and having these experiences. And now it's like, oh, we've got a box for being able to experience the universe synchronicities together, and to be able to talk about it, and to, be on this journey together. She's making me aware of things that I didn't know that I needed in a partner, and then also being those things. So we meditated together over the course of the weekend, and then she left. And after she left, I was meditating that night. And, I generally go for an hour. And so it was my first meditation on my own since being back. And I was about 30 minutes into it. And I started noticing this feeling in my hands. My hands were sort of tingling. And it felt similar to how I felt when I put my hands on my mom's leg. And when I put my hand on her back. Where it was like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I know what I'm doing. I don't know conceptually, but I know what to do. And so for some reason, I still don't know why. Normally, I meditate with my hands interlocked, my fingers interlocked, and just sort of, sitting. I have a stool over there and I kneel. And for some reason, I took my hands and put them like up like this, and I just had them here for a while. And I kept my attention in my hands. And the longer I had my attention there, the more they started tingling and like vibrating. And after a while, again, don't know why I did this, but I turned them towards each other. So they were like this. They were facing each other, and this made me actually like the tinglings really intensified. And it almost started like almost like a magnet. My hands started sort of simultaneously, like as I would slightly push them together, it would feel like they were repelling, and as I would pull them apart, again just so slightly, they would sort of pull each other back together. And so I started doing this like oscillating, really subtle oscillating motion that had my hands feeling like there was something in between them. There's nothing there, in terms of like this table, but it felt like I was feeling something in between my hands. And the more I did it, the more tangible it felt. And it kind of like gooey or something. It was weird because I felt the familiarity of the motion, and yet I was feeling something that I hadn't felt before, at least in this lifetime. And it just felt like there was something there, and I didn't know what it was. But I kept doing it, and then I kind of, not forced, but would continue the motion, and the smaller the space got between my hands, the more I would feel this like goo. And I just kind of kept doing this for, I don't have no idea how much longer, but I was just like, whew, this is crazy. I don't know what's happening, but I am here for it. And eventually my alarm went off, and so I put my hand down and turned it off. And when I kind of went back to it, it was like, all right, I'm going to have to focus again and put my attention back in my hands and sort of have this, I think, to get this feeling back, because I was doing it again and it wasn't really, the phone sort of like snapped me out of it, I guess. I'm not really sure, but I think that, there's these techniques like Qigong, Reiki, different types of energy techniques. And at the time, I didn't know what any of them did or how they worked. But I think that that's what was happening. I was doing some sort, like that goo that I was feeling was the energy, the molecules of the universe, the atoms that exist, the fabric of the universe. That's what it felt like. The nothingness in which everything exists, that isn't really nothingness. It felt like it felt like I was feeling the energy in a way that I've never felt it before. And it felt like it was a result of my heightened sensitivity to things that felt intuitively right to do. Even though if I were to try to explain it like I am now, I can't really explain why I did this. But once I started doing it, it just felt awesome. It felt so cool. And I watched a couple of thoughts as it was going on be like, this isn't real, you're just imagining this, yada yada. It's bad that you cut your chin, you're an idiot, whatever the thing, typical thoughts that were coming in, and I just decided to keep my attention on my hands and the goo. And it just, I don't know, you can do that in any moment. You can put your attention on something that is completely different than your thoughts. And it's particularly nice to do if you're having bad thoughts. But sometimes even when your attention is on something else, thoughts will start popping up and some of your attention will go back in, but you can redirect it. You can put it on something else. And it's very interesting what starts happening when you do that and sort of detach yourself from the conceptual mind that wants to tell you that there's nothing here. And even though I can't see this, I can feel it. And it feels good. It feels right. And, that was the first experience with energy movement that I've had. And it seemed to be directly because of all of these synchronistic experiences, the openness, the following of intuitive feelings, and just the openness to more. I know that I can't see anything here, and yet I can go into this quote unquote nothingness. And now what? Now what? Now I'm in the space that was nothing a second ago. So what I'm occupying this nothingness, but it's still here even when I'm not occupying it. So there's fabric here. Molecules, air. I still don't quite know how to put it into words, but I think that that's a big part of this, is following the feelings more than the conceptual understanding. And just not listening to the voice that says this isn't real. Your mind wants to understand everything and chalk up things like the 333s on the receipt and the building to just a random coincidence. And the street signs could have been anything. And, fucking people in ambulances also need to eat. And sometimes they eat at McDonald's. And you can interpret every moment as insignificant, or you can interpret every moment as significant. And these significant interpretations allow for this cultivation of wonder that leads to more significance and more amazement and just feelings that make you feel good and excited to live and to see what continues to unfold. And you begin to trust the unfolding. Like, I'm trusting that whatever it is that I'm experiencing is what's best for me right now. And I don't have to understand it conceptually to know that that's true. And that takes off this massive weight of needing to figure out what the optimal plan is, the optimal route, the mind trying to calculate everything, and just totally flowing with it. Going with the flow. And that's what this feels like. It feels like energetic water, like goo, just this flowy. I don't know. Yeah, so those were the first 2 days back in LA after this trip home with my parents. So yeah, things are good. Things are going well. And yeah, thank you for listening. We'll get to it on the next one. Peace.